I tell you one of my most impacting airplane stories. This happened, I was flying from Kathmandu, Nepal to Fujian, China. I was going to China to attend the 10-year anniversary of the children's home that I've been serving at for 5 years. And I had to fly from Kathmandu, Nepal, and we had a layover in Lhasa, Tibet, which was just a fuel stop, and then from Lhasa to Chengdu, from Chengdu to Fujian. On this certain day several years ago, when I had this flight, got to the airport, had plenty of time. It was a beautiful day. The sky was crystal clear. You could see the Himalayan mountains, the white Himalayan mountains to the north. It was a very beautiful day. Got to the airport, plenty of time. It was an Air China flight. The flight was delayed for about an hour, hour and a half. But finally, we boarded the airplane. And I looked around the airplane and I realized that most of the passengers on the airplane were Nepali college students going to study at the universities in China. I got to sit beside, on one side of me was a doctor, a dentist. She was going to China to study dentistry. On the other side of me was an engineer. He was going to study at a university in Chengdu engineering. So I started talking as the flight was there. I was the only one on this flight. And I started to talk to the people beside me, got to know them a little bit, and they're going to China. They could not speak a word of Chinese. So once they knew that I could speak a little bit of Chinese, they said, please teach us some Chinese words. We're going to be studying China for 5 years, and we need to know the language. So I'm there teaching Chinese, and we flew around Everest. We went east, and after we passed Everest, we headed up north through that valley between Everest and up into Lhasa. We landed in Lhasa. It was a beautiful landing, and got off the airplane. Had about an hour and a half while they refueled the airplane. After an hour and a half, we got back on the airplane, and we took off from Lhasa. Now, Lhasa is one of the highest airports in the world at about 12,000 feet. And we took off from Lhasa at about 20 minutes into the flight. We were about 20,000 or so feet in the air. And I'm talking to the dentist beside me, looking out the window at the beautiful, beautiful scenery, the beautiful mountains. And the mountains were that tall that you could look down and it felt that you could almost touch them with your finger. But about 20 minutes into the flight, I'm there looking out the window. And the dentist, she looks up and she looks down the hallway in the airplane. And she looks at the air vents. And smoke is starting to come out of the air vents. And she looks at that and she looks at that and she says, is that supposed to happen? Does that normally happen? And this was her first time flying on a commercial Boeing airliner. And I looked up and I looked at the smoke coming out of the vents and looked back at her and no, that doesn't normally happen. No, not on flight. That doesn't normally happen. Well, the flight stewardess, you could tell they panicked. They quickly ran up and down the hallways, checking things out, and they replaced the guys sitting in the emergency row. They replaced them with airplane staff right at the doorways, and they were there at the doorways ready to open that door. Well, the engines quit soon after that, and the pilot, he turned the airplane around. We were still pretty far from Chengdu. We're in the middle of the Himalayan mountains, a remote part of Tibet. There's nothing below us but mountains. But he turned the airplane around and we're there coasting, gliding back to Lhasa. People on the airplane started to panic. Some cried. Some didn't know what to do. Some looked out the window. The dentist beside me, she looked at her hand and she saw some lines in her hand and she said, that line is just too long. I'm not going to die today because of that line. I looked at my hands and I saw lines going here, lines going there. And I said, well, I don't know. I could die today. But if I die, I know I'm ready. Because I'm a Christian. And I got to tell her a little bit about Jesus. But then the thought did occur to me. What if this is my last day? What if when we land in Lhasa that we hit the runway and the airplane bursts into flames? Is this the end? And the thought occurred to me and I started pondering that for a little bit. That I took my phone out and I turned it on. And I said, well, if we crash land on a mountain somewhere, maybe they can trace that signal and find out where we are. I started to pray and ask God, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to stand up and start preaching the salvation message to everybody on this airplane? God, what should I do? And the dentist, she turned to me and she said, why are you so calm? You know, you could die, but why are you so calm? And I said, because I know that if I die, I'm ready to die. And if I die, I'm going to heaven. Well, that day, the two people beside me heard the salvation message. But we finally got to the Lhasa airport. And we didn't circle around, but the pilot took the airplane. By this time, we coasted. We were almost against the ground. And we came into Lhasa airport. We hit that runway. And the airplane pilot did not even brake. But we hit the runway. We went the whole way to the end of the runway. And I didn't realize this before. But at the end of the runways, there's a chute, a three-sided chute, that if anything happens to an airplane, you can park into that chute. And behind that chute is the security personnel. Well, we went into that chute, and he stopped the airplane, and just like that, there were 5 fire trucks surrounding the airplane. And everybody's looking out the window, looking at these fire trucks, and I looked out too, and I said, ooh, you know what? This might be more serious than I thought. Just like that, when we landed, the doors were open, and there were stairs pushed in front of the doorways. And the flight stewards, they started yelling, get off the airplane, please get off the airplane and go to the buses. Behind this chute, there was also buses. But this is Air China. And when the flight stewards got excited, they forgot how to speak English. And the majority of the people on that airplane were Nepalese, and they could not understand Chinese. So she's there telling them, get off the airplane, and they just looked at her. What is she trying to tell us? Well, they found out that I could speak a little Chinese, and I was able to translate from Chinese into English. And the dentist beside me, she then would translate into Nepali. And together we worked, and together we got everybody off the airplane. Just drop your stuff, leave it there, get off the airplane. And we ended up running across the tarmac in Lhasa to the buses waiting behind the chute. There was also 5 ambulances. By this time, several people had collapsed, and they went to the ambulances to put breathing masks on them. Well, we took the buses and we went around to the front of the airport, and we disembarked from the buses, went in the front door, and they had a circle of security personnel around us. And we all gathered there in one little group. One Nepali beside me said, oh, I left my passport on the airplane. What can I do? My passport and all my paperwork's on the airplane. Well, together, working with him and working with the dentist, and she could speak Nepali, I could speak Chinese, and together we went to the officials and said, would you please try to get his passport? This is his seat number. And together we worked things out. Well, after some time, they took us through security and they put us into a holding room in the airport. And we sat there for hours. There was some TV cameras came through, and they interviewed several of us. And as we're sitting there, they also had some TVs in that waiting room, and we're there watching the TV wondering, are we going to get our moment on TV today? Well, after a while, we got hungry, and they brought some food, and they brought some water. And finally, about 11 p.m., they finally brought another airplane. And rumors started having it that 11 p.m. they went and took us, and nobody knew what was happening, but they went and took us through security again and up to the general waiting area and ready to board a bus. And the rumors started going that we were going to get on that bus and it was going to take us out, and we were going to get on the same airplane which we had so abruptly departed this morning. Well, no one was going to get on that same airplane. Well, we all got on the bus, and they started taking the bus out to where they park the airplanes. In Lhasa, it's a small airport. And we went out there, and we could see one airplane sitting at the parking area. And that was the airplane that we had so abruptly departed. The engines were open, the doors were open, everything was open. And it looked like, oh no, are we going to be getting onto that airplane? People started panicking and said, I'm not going to go into that airplane. Don't put me on that airplane. I'll stay right here. But the bus, it drove past. On the other side of that airplane was another airplane. And that was a newer one. We got onto that airplane and we took off. And needless to say, as we took off at 11 p.m., we're flying to Chengdu. Most of us held on to our armrests. Well, we ended up flying to Chengdu. It was about 2 a.m. in the morning. Most of us had missed our connecting flights. Those that were transferring to college, they missed their pickup rides. But the airplane, they went and put us up into a real nice hotels, and they gave us the equivalent of about $75 spending money. You know, that day might not have ended that way. But in the end, I look back on that and I say, you know, I would have crashed there in the middle of the Himalayan mountains, and that would have been it. You know, God is still in control. But the question that I have for each one of you as brothers and sisters is, are you ready to meet your God? We don't know when that time is, but what we have to do is to be ready to meet our God. That day, I don't know if I was truly ready, but by the end of the day, I was ready to meet my God. Thank you.